everybody. Welcome. We're very pleased to see so many people tonight, where we have the very great honor of having Dave McKean. Sorry.
Steve McQueen?
Yeah.
If only.
Visiting, where he's going to talk about his brilliant artwork and very long career in art. And we're looking forward to it.
Okay.
And we also have a special print, which is a print of the very pretty picture that Dave sent us on our 50th birthday. And it is numbered, there's 50, and it's signed, and you will be able to buy one later on. Everybody today who has a ticket can buy it at half price, which is 200. Later on, it'll be 400. So, thank you, Dave, for coming. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming along. I never know who I'm going to be talking to, so I tend to just bring everything, really, a bit of everything, and click through and try and add some explanation. I'm very bad at looking back over my work. I don't really like looking back. I like looking to the next thing. That's the excitement. But I did a large retrospective recently, this huge book called Thalamus. So I've been forced to look back and try and figure out what I've been doing for the last 30 years, really, just messing around. What it all meant, what it all adds up to. So this is that book. It tries to give an overview of everything. I try to include everything, including my old art school work, right up to now, because I'm a product of my teenage enthusiasms. And I tried to use it as a place to do some essays about living a creative life. I've been doing talks in art schools and talking to fellow professionals and just talking to people generally. You get asked the same questions often about where do inspiration come from, why you do what you do, and I try to use it as a place to put some of those thoughts down. So this is my old art school work. I did 4 years studying graphic design, but I did everything. I did drawing and painting, and photography, printmaking, filmmaking, and just played. After my first year, where I went to art school completely blinkered, liking comics, just wanting everybody to leave me alone so I could get on and draw the comics that I wanted to draw, my teachers finally won the battle of wills and got me to look up and out into the world. And then I just put the comics away for a while and enjoyed playing. While I was at art school, I met a struggling writer by the name of Neil Gaiman. No idea what's happened to him. That used to be a funny joke. Now it's not such a funny joke. Anyway, we did this book called Violent Cases together, and Neil had written it in a writer's workshop. It was a prose piece. So he gave it to me. We were both working on a magazine that never happened. He gave it to me and I turned it into a comic. And we managed to get a publisher along the way. And nearly at the end, we showed the pages that we'd done to DC Comics, who were visiting. And so I started working at DC. This is a strange Batman book. I never know what people know and what they don't know. So I'm just assuming that nobody knows anything. So if I'm not talking down to you, I promise. I'm just assuming that everything needs a bit of explanation. This is an odd Batman book. Now I'm not really much of a superhero fan. I love comics. I've always loved the medium of comics. But the Batman story was strange to me. A boy watches his parents get killed. That's terrible, and I can see how that would damage you. And you grow up and you become very successful. He gets wealthy and decides, right now, I can make a difference. I've got all this money, I can make a difference. And then you turn the page and he's dressed up as a big bat. There's pages missing here, I'm sure. Anyway, never mind. And so that was our strange Joker. And because I never really understood it as a bloke dressed up as a bat, I got together with the writers, Grant Morrison, Scottish writer, and we talked it over, and actually we were both ready to experiment a bit more. So we turned it into a dream story, really, a symbolic story. So it's much more of a man-animal, not a man dressed up as a bat. And that seemed to make sense. So that was that. Then this is another book with Neil Gaiman called Mr. Punch. In England, Punch and Judy is a children's puppet show. Almost all English people have a trace memory of seeing a Punch and Judy show as a little kid. And Mr. Punch speaks with a swazzle in his mouth. He goes, "That's the way to do it." Got a strange voice. And there's a dog, and there's some sausages, and a ghost. People remember these little bits, but nobody remembers the story, the plot. The plot of Punch and Judy is a man is left in charge of a baby while his wife goes away. And the baby starts crying, and he can't stop the baby from crying. So he kills the baby. And his wife comes back, and is not very happy about that. So he kills his wife. And a policeman comes to arrest him for murder, and he kills the policeman. It is a relentless serial killer story for small English children. At this point, he's tried and found guilty for murder and sentenced to hang. And in this wonderful conversation, he manages to convince the hangman to hang himself instead. In the end, the devil comes to take Mr. Punch to hell. And the final line of the original script is, and then he kills the devil. And then Mr. Punch is free to spread his words of good cheer to all the children. So we just thought this was extraordinary as a way of seeing what that change of context means from a child to an adult. You see it as a child, it's just jumping puppets and lots of hitting with a stick, and it's fun and silly. You watch it again as an adult, and you just can't believe that this is the same thing you saw as a kid. There's always one kid at the back who realises what's going on. He's absolutely white, and his mouth open, aghast at all their friends. So we thought it was extraordinary to have this story as a sort of series of murders as the spine of the book. And this unreliable memoir, this sense of an adult trying to remember this thing that happened to them when they were young. And then sort of you get the feeling they get to the end of the story and everybody goes home, and then, an hour later he goes, "That's what happened. Of course, that's what happened." So that's Mr. Punch. When I was in art school, I wrote all my own stories. So it was very odd for me to work with a writer, Neil and Grant, and I'd started working with other writers. So I was very keen to get back to writing my own books. This is my first book, called Cages. It started as a series of short stories, but all the stories seemed to take place in the same building, and the people seemed to know each other, so it became this big multi-chapter novel. And it's about all the things that I was fascinated with at the time. Creativity, belief, why we believe in things, or if we believe in things, and the nature of that belief. Falling in love, jazz, and human communication. I wanted to make comics that had characters that spoke the way I felt people really spoke. You start saying something and get halfway through it and then lose track, and the body language is so important and the facial expressions are so important. I wanted to see that in the book. So that was Cages. And then I've continued doing comics ever since. I've been happy doing other things as well, but I've never really lost my love of comics. Comics are my first love. So I do lots of short stories for different things. This was for a gallery exhibition. This was, actually, both of those were for gallery exhibitions. I'm very happy if I can find venues for comics outside of the usual place where comics are seen, in comic book shops and comic book publishers. I'm very happy making comics for album covers or for advertising or magazines or anything else. So these are all short stories done in the style that I hope is appropriate for that particular story. So if it needs to be a collage, great. If it's a sort of collection of memories, that seems appropriate. If all it needs is to be a simple line drawing, that's fine too. And then this is the book, actually second to last book, probably my favourite book that I've done. It's called Black Dog, Dreams of Paul Nash. Paul Nash is an English painter. He was a war artist in the First World War and a little bit in the Second World War, though he was very elderly at that point. It was a commission by the Imperial War Museum and a foundation in England that commissioned artworks across every medium for 4 years, from 2014 to 2018, 100 years after the First World War. They commissioned films and poetry and clothes design and all sorts of things. They wanted to commission a graphic novel, a comic. So they asked for a pitch. I thought it would be good to see the war experience through one person's eyes. And I thought it would be interesting to see that experience through a creative person's eyes. And it could have been a poet or a writer, but I chose this painter, Paul Nash. I thought he was the strongest of the war painters, because a lot of soldiers came back from that period, very reluctant to talk about their experiences. It had hurt them so deeply. Whereas a creative person like Paul Nash, even though he didn't talk about his war experiences very much, it's embedded in the work that he did, in every line that he drew, his experiences there. So I thought that would be appropriate. The book is called The Dreams of Paul Nash because he painted dreamscapes, really. He was a landscape artist, but all of his landscapes are psychological spaces. They're not real. And so each chapter takes moments from his childhood growing up, moments from his work, moments from his experiences in the trenches, and mixes them together in the way that dreams do, cross-fertilize. And then hopefully it's drawn in the style that I think is appropriate for the emotions and atmosphere and ideas in that particular chapter. This is him and his art school friends discussing the impending war. A moment that never happened. He could have been shipped off to Greece, but managed to get out of it by being ill, by contracting measles, and he would have died at that point because almost all of the generals died in that conflict. His marriage. He got married just before the first Zeppelins came over. A chapter about his relationship with his parents and grandparents. Chess pieces around a chessboard. Leaving the docks to go to France and Belgium, to the trenches. A chapter about a chap called Eric Kennington, who he grew up with, who became a great portrait artist, who found drawing very easy. Paul Nash always found drawing difficult. An imagined period in hospital, finding a forest of bloody veins in a back room. A chapter about boredom. A lot of life in the trenches was just waiting and cleaning your kit and living in this sort of dreadful, desiccated landscape. But he and his brother, who was also a painter, found inspiration in little shafts of light, little bits of grass growing, and his artist's eye got him through the experience. He wrote that when we're all gone, when the war's over and the soldiers leave, and the battlefield is empty, eventually nature will flood in and fill the world back with green, like a wave waiting just out of view. And he felt that that's what they needed to be back in England. They needed to be a wave of revolution, taking their war experiences back to the people in England to tell them what war really is. An imagined conversation with his brother in a trench, and so on. And so part of this was to be a performance of some kind. The commission was to do a book, but also a performance of some description. It could have just been me in a room like this reading the book to you. That would be boring. So I play piano. I've always written music. I thought it would be interesting to turn it into some sort of performance work. So I have this great friend, Matt Sharp, who's a cellist and opera singer, baritone singer. So I turned it into an hour's orchestral music and a song cycle. He sang. I played piano and did the narration. My wife plays violin and played Paul Nash's wife in it as well. And I turned the book into a series of animatic projections to go behind. And we did it at the Tate Gallery and at the memorials in Amiens and in Germany, and then in India and Canada and across festivals in Europe. And it's the most wonderful experience, creative experience I've had. This whole project was really wonderful and changed the way I work really as well. This is the last comic I had out, called Raptor. I walk every morning. I go for a walk every morning, and I take my problems with me, and then I make notes in my notebook of story ideas and ideas for images. And what happens is they tend to coagulate into possible stories. 3 or 4 ideas connect and feel like a story. So this one is has come from a couple of different places. I'm absolutely in love with the current strain of nature writers in England. The main guy his name is Robert Macfarlane, and he comes with a whole reading list of wonderful authors like Nan Shepherd and various others, J.A. Baker. And I love all of these books. And they are sort of recreating and rediscovering the language of nature. And it's quite a political thing to do, because politicians have a tendency to wipe off areas of the map as just scrub or wasteland, as an excuse to build on it. But of course there's all kinds of ecological ecosystems going on there, so he's rebuilding the language in these books. So I love all that. I also fell in love with this Welsh writer called Arthur Machen, who's a horror mystery writer. And not only his stories, which are very beautiful and mysterious, but also his life. He lost his wife young. She died of cancer. And he, for a while, became obsessed with seeing her again. He just wanted to see her again. So he joined the Order of the Golden Dawn to try and go pierce the realm into another world. And just this, you just feel the grief, really, this desperation to see his wife again. And I thought that was a very beautiful, moving story. And then the other strange element that found its way in was, I think like a lot of us, I feel completely powerless at the moment with the huge political forces around us. And I just wanted to say something about that. I'm not really a political writer. But the one thing, and it's very hard to write something about English politics that works for Scandinavian politics or American politics. But the one consistent seemed to be, as far as I'm concerned, that money corrupts everything. And money corrupts politics, absolutely. And that was my one little idea I wanted to push in there. So that's what the book is, really. It's a strange mix of these 3 elements. So the stories, there are 2 narratives that sort of collide and touch each other and talk to each other. Different styles again. This is a book I'm working on in my lunch breaks. I've been on this for a long time. It's a reversioning of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, one of my favourite films, great Ufa silent film, which you may have seen. Yeah, a few nods, good. I love this. I love the film, and I love the story of the film. You know, it was written by two guys, Hans Janowicz and Karl Mayer, who wrote a completely anarchistic script, amoral script. But then Robert Vine came in to direct it, and he wrote a completely different ending for it, which completely changed the context of it. But it's a great ending. It's a great twist ending, probably the first great twist ending in cinema. And I like both those things. So I've written a new version, completely different story, but a new version that has both of those things. I put the anarchy back in. And then this is the book, the kind of out of my lunch breaks. This is the series book that I'm working on at the moment with my lovely hero, Robert McFarlane. He had developed a project with an actor called Johnny Flynn about the Epic of Gilgamesh, and George Smith, who's a great Assyriologist who translated a lot of the stone tablets. And he did it as a performance piece during lockdown, during the COVID year. And I went to see it and thought, that's beautiful and should be expanded. So I talked to him about expanding it into a much bigger story. So that's what we're doing. It's a long graphic novel, and I'm slowly working my way through it. Again, different styles for different things. So these are some of the pages that I'm on at the moment. So that was a lot. That was a lot to do, that page. Okay, so those are the sort of main books. I've continued doing covers. I started doing Hellblazer covers and then Sandman covers for Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. The idea really initially was to do covers that spoke in a language that would reach people who maybe were not reading comics, who were maybe buying albums and novels and seeing movies from the posters, and to try and speak in that tone of voice. Because we thought they would like these comics if they gave them a go. So that was proved successful. We managed to find an audience outside of the regular comics biz, and I continued doing those covers up until very recently. So it's about 30 years' work. It feels like a diary looking back over these covers. These were the last ones. And I did title, well, I was supposed to do title sequence for the Sandman television show, but then Netflix decided they didn't want to do title sequences anymore. So all the work that I did was shunted to the end, at the point where with a red button you can just go past it and not see it. So a complete waste of my time, but never mind. And then in the midst of all of that, I had some children. I thought it would be nice to do some work for them. Because they're a very good audience. So these are some children's books. This is again with Neil, Wolves in the Walls. The pleasure of this really was getting manuscripts from writers like S.F. Said and David Almond and Neil, and reading them to my kids before I've done the pictures to gauge their reaction to things. Because often the stuff that they found unsettling, I was surprised at. I didn't think that stuff would be a problem. And the stuff that I thought would be troublesome and scary, they just thought was silly and it was fine. So you can't take it for granted. So these are the children's books. Coraline, you may know, was turned into a film by Henry Selick. Very bad American film. This is The Savage. This is a writer called David Almond, and I really love his books. They come from a very deep place. He often writes about loss. He often rehearses tough emotions for kids in the safety of a children's book, and I think that's a really great thing to do. This is called The Savage, about a boy who's lost his dad, and he just puts all of his anger and fury into the story of this wild child that lives in the woods. A couple more. Joe's Poltergeist is a book about the loss of faith, a children's book about the loss of faith. I mean, it's tough material. But I really love these books. Slog's Dad is a very odd one. Again, it's about a boy whose father's died, but he sees him one day on a park bench with a friend. The whole book is just one scene where he and his friends see this guy, and he looks like his father who's died, and they go up and talk to him, and he says, "Yes, I am." And and the friend that he's with asks him a few questions to see if he really is his father, and he answers the questions correctly. And Slog says, "Oh, you must come back to see Mum because she really misses you and everything." And he said, I can't do that. I'm really sorry, but it's been lovely to see you. And they say their goodbyes, and he leaves. End of book. And I thought, what? So I called David Ullman and said, I don't really want to illustrate that. I don't know what happened. Is he an angel come down? Really? That's a dreadful story. Is he a bloke in the town playing a cruel trick on the kid? That's a terrible story. So I ended up saying, look, I don't really want to illustrate this story. What I'd like to do is illustrate interpretations of it and imagine different possibilities for what that is. So that's what it is, really. The story runs just as text in a book, black text on white paper, and then you turn the page and then there's a visual sequence without any words for a while. And there's about 6 of them, 6, 7 different interpretations of what that is. So you get to the book, you still really don't understand what it is. But because it's been reiterated in this way many times, you just really get a sense that this is just a kid who really misses his dad and just wants to see his dad again. This is from Joe Quinn. I like finding interesting storytelling devices. Comics is an incredibly powerful medium, visual medium. So things like this, where she's talking about a girl who died, and the girl is the panel boarder who comes in and touches her on the shoulder. Things like that I like. This is a book about overreaching creativity called Mouse, Bird, Snake, Wolf, about some kids filling in the blanks in the world with their own creations. They create a mouse and a bird. The snake's trouble, but they really run into problems with the wolf. This is a book I did with the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins. I'm a great admirer of his science writing. He said in interview many times that he wanted to do a book that was a sort of introduction to critical thinking and science, and that sounded like such a great idea. It never seemed to arrive. So I got my agent to find out who his agent was, so I tracked him down and went to see him, and he hadn't really got very far with the idea, but he had 2 or 3 possible outlines, but one of them was a series of chapters as questions. What is an earthquake? Who was the first person? What is a rainbow? And the first part of each chapter answers those questions in the way that we have historically answered those questions, with theological stories and mythological stories and folk stories. And then the second part of each chapter is our very best, clearest scientific explanation to try and answer those questions, and to try and make the scientific imagery even more astounding and awe-inspiring than the folk imagery, the gods and the creatures. That was the challenge. So that's what we did. Magic of Reality. I spent a couple of years with John Cale, who was in Velvet Underground, if you know that band. Good, lots of nods. This is great. I'm used to talking now at art schools to children, and then none of them know anything. They know nothing. So this is his autobiography, Watch Welsh for Zen, which came in a book form and also a loose paper form in a box. So you could just reorder his life in any way you fancy, which I always enjoyed that. And then lots of other illustrated books along the way. I'm getting close to my 100th book. This is American Gods, Neil again. Stephen King. I've done a few for Stephen King now. This is Night Shift. This is Crime and Punishment. A very important book. I think everybody should read Crime and Punishment. The message at the centre of it, very important now. I was asked to do any book older than 100 years old, so I chose this one. And I was asked to do, I think, 6 paintings and a couple of drawings, and ended up doing about, I think, 50, 60 drawings and 12 paintings. Just got out of hand, as usual. Lots of drawings for this, and paintings. And then this is another one that got out of hand. This is Gormenghast, Mervyn Peake's book, or trilogy, I should say. Something I read as a teenager and actually didn't like very much. I didn't think much to it. I think I thought it was a fantasy novel, but it's not really a fantasy novel. It's a kind of a political satire. So if you look at it with a different perspective, it's quite interesting. And the first book is Titus Groan. There's Titus Groan and Gormenghast, the first 2. And then towards the end of his life, he wrote a 3rd book, which is patchy but interesting. Anyway, these are the covers for that. Again, asked to do about 10 drawings, and I think I did about 150 in the end. Every single page had imagery on it that I wanted to draw. And it's set in Gormenghast Castle, which is this labyrinthine place, so the images have a labyrinth quality to them. The white of the page becomes the sort of labyrinth through the image. Lots of natural history imagery again, which I'm very happy with. I always like that one for some reason. I don't know why. This is Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, one of my favourite books. This extraordinary conversation between Marco Polo and Kubla Khan. Marco Polo just trying to describe his travels around the world to various cities, but every city he describes sounds a bit like Venice. So you start to wonder whether he's really gone anywhere. But these are the city drawings for those. Again, a different style, the style that just felt appropriate for them. This is House on the Borderland, William Hope Hodgson's strange late 19th century sort of psychedelic horror mad book with some extra short stories as well. Really, again, another really interesting book. This is coming out, just about to come out. This is Ray Bradbury's short stories. Again, lots of drawings. During lockdown, this chap Bob Burden, who created a character called Flaming Carrot, have you ever heard of that? I've never read it myself, but he's a poet as well, so he sent me some poems to illustrate. So every morning I had a coffee and a poem and a drawing. This is a book with S.F. Said. I've done a few books now with this author, S.F. Said. This won the British Book of the Year last year, which was nice. A book set in an alternate London, where I haven't got time to go into the plot of it. It's got tigers in it, that's all you need to know. I've done a bunch of books with this amazing author, Ian Sinclair. Ian Sinclair is a London writer, but he writes about levels of London, historical London, mythological London. He has a mind like the British Library, an extraordinary writer. If you ever get a chance to read him, I really recommend him. I'm sure you know Alan Moore's writing. Alan Moore is a huge fan of Ian Sinclair, would like to be Ian Sinclair, I think, really. Secretly on the side. There's a little quarter, look, that's Alan Moore's quarter face there. And then this is another book with Ian, 50 Catacomb Saints. It's a book for Alan Moore, there you go. Voice of the Fire. Book covers, magazine covers, this is for New Scientist. And I've done various things for New Yorker and various things over the years. And then music. Music was my other great love. As a teenager, I was in lots of bands. and played at festivals and things, and that was my life choice, to go the music route full on or to go to art school. And I ended up thinking I love jazz, and I thought I'm never going to be the jazz musician that I want to be. I'm just not that good. But I thought I stood a chance of doing something a bit better in art. And a lot of good bands have been started at art school, so that I could still keep the bands going in art school. Pink Floyd started in art school. But I play music all the time, and listen and work to music all the time. So I always wanted to do album covers for the people that I like. I've done a lot of work for this guy, Bill Bruford. He was the drummer with King Crimson, and has this band Earthworks. I've done all their covers over a period of 20 years. And there is something about putting on some music, even music that I wouldn't normally really choose to listen to, and just responding to it, because it's elemental. Music is abstract and goes straight in. So I love those days. It's usually a day doing the album cover. This is a record label I started with a mate of mine, Ian Bellamy, who's played with Bruford for a while, but is a great sax player. This is our first release. This is called Food. It's avant-garde Norwegian jazz. It's not a big audience. We know most of the people who bought our CDs personally. But we did get some great, so there's a box, and you get postcards and the CD, and you get a little twist of pasta, dried pasta, or a dried chili, or a bay leaf in there. And we got a great review from the BBC, actually, who said they really loved the music, and if you buy 50 copies, you get a free meal for 2 out of it as well. Brilliant. Win. And then lots of other bands over the years. I've done, I don't know how many, 150, 200 albums. Mostly for bands with names like Poke Your Mother with a Killer Badger, really aggressive industrial metal-y bands. This is Fear Factory. I don't know why I seem to attract these people. That's John Cale again. Circus.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You've done a cover for Tool.
I have never done a cover for Tool. I think they have their own people who tend to copy other people. I only say that not because I think they copied me at all, but they have copied the Quay brothers, who are friends of mine, for their music videos. They're absolute rip-offs of the Quay brothers. So, not that I wouldn't say no to doing a Tool cover, but I'm not sure about their ethics. This is for Counting Crows, a band called Counting Crows. This was actually a book cover for a children's book called The Day I Swapped My Dad for 2 Goldfish. And Adam Derwitz, who's the leader of Counting Crows, liked that book cover and wanted that. And I tried to get him to change anything on it. Even the direction of the fish were swimming, he wanted the same direction. So we ended up with the same cover. I changed the next time the book went to press, I did a new cover for that instead. So got to get around it somehow. This is my mate, cellist friend Matthew Sharp, Hans Scarl. Frontline Assembly is another industrial metal-y band. They live in the same block as Skinny Puppy. You must be able to hear that house. They're in Canada. You must be able to hear it from Florida, that house. I've done about 20 years worth of work for Frontline now. Rolling Stones, Tori Amos, all sorts. This is my first Photoshop job. This was for Michael Nyman. Again, I did a bunch of album covers for Michael. Mostly his movie soundtracks, piano. I made every single mistake doing this. My first go at using Photoshop, and I'm amazed anything came out at all. It wasn't just a complete blank. This is a fantastic Norwegian musician, Stian Carstensen. I don't know if you know him, absolute multi-instrumental genius. But I included this because we did a music video together during lockdown. And it was long-distance directing. He would go off into Norway. He lives in the middle of nowhere in Norway. And he would shoot strange footage of him playing his various instruments and things going on. And send me all this footage. And then I started to just cut it. and find a narrative. And I found sequences that would go together, and every time there was a gap or a shot missing, I would send a little order list to him in Norway, and he'd go off again and fill in the gaps with a few more shots. Long distance directing, it's fantastic. All films should be made that way. It's great. So we did that. So, Stian again. And then I'm just sort of going through the sort of different areas of my stuff, really. Photography I discovered doing the Sandman covers, and so I published 4 monographs of photographs and worked for Kodak and various people doing photography work. And then these little sketchbooks. So this Copenhagen one is the new one. I think some of you were here, I think, for the opening. I mentioned it started in Vienna with my kids, trying to keep them interested in the gallery exhibitions I was taking them to. I gave them sketchbooks of their own, and we all ended up drawing our favourite Gustav Klimt faces and things. When you draw, you really pay attention, and they came back with these lovely sketchbooks. I started publishing mine. Vienna was the first one. This is Venice, Prague, and then Copenhagen is the new one. This is another project that's ongoing. I started it in 2008, so I've got to finish it soon. This is ridiculous. It's a book of paintings and drawings inspired by silent films. I love that period of filmmaking. In fact, almost every medium, whether it's photography, anything, the early days of it, when you can really get a sense of people struggling with it and working out what it is and what it does and what the language is. I really love seeing that. And in those early films, especially in the 20s, in the 10s, in the 1890s and the 2000s and the 1900s, it was more like film theatre. And then there came a point when they realised the camera could move, and suddenly a whole new language was created. And those films made in the 1920s, I think, are exquisite. They surprised me. And the imagery got under my skin when I was very young. They're ghostly, elusive, liminal images. And they stayed in my head in a way that modern film images don't. And I've been doing this book as a way of trying to work out why. What is it about these images that is so compelling? So I'm just recreating them, really, trying to find my own way into those images. So there's lots of paintings and collages. And I keep thinking I've got to the end of the project, and then I discover a whole bunch of new films, and I want to include those as well. So it's an endless project. And drawings. So half the book is these drawings and Napoleon. And then I've been working on the last couple of years with this book with Jorge Gonzalez, great Spanish illustrator, comics guy, art painter. And I had always wanted to do a conversation book, inspired really by a book called The Conversation by Milton Glaser and Jean-Michel Follon, a book I discovered in art school and absolutely loved. And I wanted to find somebody to play with, really. Nobody would play with me. I talked to various friends of mine about doing it, and they all said, "Oh yeah, sounds great," but nothing happened. And I mentioned it to Jorge Gonzalez. Straight the next day he sent me his first picture, so we're off. And so 256 pages later, I think we'll have a book. I think we've got another couple of months to go, and then we'll have it done. There are no rules, there is no story, there are no preconceptions. It is simply, you send the other person an image and you respond to it in however you like, and send that back and they respond to that. So it's like a little chess game. The project was called Your Move for a while, but we liked the idea that it would be universal with no words, no text. So now it's called And, as in an ampersand, question mark. So anybody can understand that, and there will be no text in the book. And so these are some of the spreads from that. It also gives us license to get things wrong, which I like. In our professional lives, Jorge and mine, there's an impetus in the work that we do to work out the issues and get things right. Whereas this, it doesn't matter if things look a bit wonky. It doesn't matter. It was just what happened that day. And there's a great freedom that comes from that, I think. This is a whole other bunch of work. About 20 years ago, I started working with a great chef called Heston Blumenthal. He was doing a big book of all his recipes at his restaurant called the Fat Duck, and wanted it to have a picture book. He loves Alice in Wonderland. He wanted it to have a picture book feel. So he was shown my books. I think he was shown a bunch of books, but he liked Wolves in the Walls. And we got together and immediately clicked. And ever since then, I've done all of his big books, illustrated those. I've done murals for the restaurants, menu design, and also product design within the restaurant. So it all has a sort of picture book, playful feel to it. This was the most recent book that we did together. These are murals at the restaurants. This is at Heathrow Airport, and this one is in Australia. And so it goes. It's a lot of work now. This is a book of historical recipes. Everything that he serves in his restaurant obviously looks like an art on a plate. There's one dish that comes out about halfway through, and it's just a cup of sort of greyish liquid. It looks nothing. And I watched it, the first time I went there, I watched it being served. And I watched people drinking it. And just exploding. And then the conversation, the laughter around the table. And you think, what is that? It's hot and cold tea, but vertically in the glass. And there's no divider. The left liquid is hot and the right liquid is cold. You don't look impressed with this. This is magic, isn't it? I mean, he should be burnt at the stake for doing that. How? I know. I've never really, and it's really lovely doing this little exhibition. In fact, this really suits this space. It's been great to fit this work in here. It just absolutely works. Most exhibitions I have trouble with. There doesn't seem to be a purpose for it. It's just a big white room somewhere and it's a bunch of different things. I found a way around it by doing narrative exhibitions. And I've enjoyed that a lot more. So this was a show that I put together called Coast Road. So the story takes place around the gallery. And it doesn't take people long to come in and immediately click, there's a sequence here. And that they should start reading it. And they spend a lot more time in the gallery reading, going through the story, and getting lost in the emotions of the story. So we've had some great reactions doing these things. This is one of them. This is called The Blue Tree, another narrative show. In the morning, the show opened at 5 in the morning. I planted blue branches all over the town, pointing up to the gallery with little baubles on with words inside. So I took over the town completely. I very enjoyed doing this. We're getting close to the end now, promise. So film is my other great love. I thought I wanted to make some films. Nobody's going to knock on my door, give me money to make films. So I just made a couple of shorts with friends, really. I got a crew of 4 together, a couple of actors, and made 2 short films. This is called The Week Before.
When was this?
This was 1996. And I wanted the films to look like my illustrations, really. I wanted them to have a visual similarity, parity with my illustrations. Not just be another film, on the pile. There's so many films that made. With a budget of nothing and goodwill over a long weekend from some friends of mine, and a couple of actors dressed up with masks that I made, it had to be a small, a little project. So it's a film about God creating everything in the entire universe. But it's the week before. So it's the week before God creates everything in the universe. The week when he shows up on Monday morning with the best intention of creating everything in the universe, but can't really think of anything, you know. Goes fishing instead, generally puts it off. So it's about that staring at a blank piece of paper, creativity from nothing. That's what it's about. Inspired by Django Reinhardt music. The other one, Neon, is a little ghost story, melancholy ghost story, set in Venice, my favourite city. Copenhagen is second only to Venice, my favourite city. Put that in. Sorry about that. Both these films played at festivals and were seen by Lisa Henson. Oh, that's something else actually. So this is something else. I talked about the Black Dog Project and doing that live. I was inspired to do that live because I got to do this project, which was the short films that I did with some other short subjects. A project called 9 Lives, 9 short stories set to music and song and narration with a live band at the Sydney Opera House. Again, really loved doing this and got me back into performing and led on to the Black Dog show. But that was the end of the sort of silent short film bit. So they were seen by Lisa Henson, who gave Neil... Lisa Henson is Jim Henson's daughter. Jim Henson did The Muppets and Dark Crystal and those ones. She had an opportunity to make a very, very, very low budget fantasy film. And she knew Neil and she liked my shorts. So we had 2 weeks together to bash together an idea for a film. And I took in scenes and books and music and all sorts of things. Neil brought some things in. And we hacked together a script in 2 weeks because we needed to get it in our little deadline, little window of opportunity. That's what we did. It was called Mirror Mask. And what should have happened is that Sony Pictures, who were producing it, should have said, it's okay, it's got some interesting bits in it. Take 2 or 3 months and go away and write it properly. But we're interested in doing it. What they actually said was, great, here's a check, go and make it. And we were so stunned, and we didn't want to jinx it, that we just sort of snatched the check and then ran off and tried to solve its narrative problems along the way, which was it's always a bad idea, really, to do that. So in the end, 18 months later, I love my central actress, Stephanie Leonidas. She completely saved me. I loved my studio of brand straight out of art school students. This was their first job. They did a great job for me. But in the end, I just think it should have been written better. It needed to lose its fantasy nonsense and be a more interesting, stranger story. But that's life. It was a great experience. This is Stephanie and Valentine in a CG world. So it was mostly shot in a big green screen studio with floating giants. That is Gina McKee as a huge floating head. This is my second feature film. I'm much happier with this one. It's called Luna. It's not a children's film. It's about 2 couples who meet over a long weekend. One of the couples has lost a baby and the emotions are very raw. And they're old friends, so old enmities and skeletons bubble up over the long weekend. But the life of the child that died is lived out in a series of dreams over that weekend. So what it feels like is it's the weekend when the grieving turns. They stop looking always back at the grief and start to move forward. It's based on a couple of friends of mine from art school who went through that experience. Shot in this little house in Devon. That's my son as one of the dreams. That's another dream with Dervla Cohen. in the paper version of the studio. There was little bits of animation in it, but it was mostly live action. Okay, that man is Bill Mitchell. He is a theatre director. Or he was a theatre director. He very sadly died. Sorry, there's a lot of death in this show. Sorry about that. But that's life. He was theatre director for Wild Works in Cornwall. And we did 2 projects together. And he's the most influential person in my recent life. He completely changed the way I work. So coming out of art school, I really loved to plan things. And all the stories I wrote on little bits of paper and planned them all out visually in front of me, so I could see the whole territory and see where I was going. And I really liked that way of working, but I was nailing it down, really. He had a much more playful way of working. And the first project was this one with Michael Sheen, the actor Michael Sheen. Wanted to do a passion play in Wales called The Passion of Port Talbot. And then I spent some time with Michael and Bill and said, this all sounds amazing, why is nobody shooting it? And they said, well, you do it. So I shot it as this film, Gospel of Us. We ran down to Wales just in time to shoot it, we being 10 cameramen. I had me and 9 documentary cameramen. And I had a rough idea of what was going to happen, very rough. And so I could brief them, and we had one chance. It was only ever going to happen once, over 3 days, Easter 2011. We could not be seen to shoot it, because this was a theatrical experience. This was for the audience, it was for the local people there, it was for anybody that came to the show. So we could not get in the way, we couldn't have big cranes and all this kind of junk. We had to be part of the audience and shoot covertly with cameras. Lots of people were shooting on their iPhones and stuff, so we had to join them. That was the only way we could do it. So I had a plan, and then on the first day, all the paparazzi showed up wanting pictures of Michael Sheen, got in the way of everything, and my plan just got ripped up. And my new plan, as of 12 o'clock on the first day, was just shoot anything. Anything that comes in front of you, shoot that. And I'll somehow make a film of it. I'll take it all home and get something out of it. So that's what that project was. The way Bill works is he finds himself with a commission or in a place, and he invites actors and musicians and historians and scientists and locals, and looks at the weather and looks at the history and the folk stories and the bird life and everything about this whole territory. And slowly, a narrative starts to evolve. And just by playing every day, it slowly evolves. And interesting bits stick to other interesting bits. And it's a terrifying way of working, because you have no idea where you're going. You've got an audience showing up in 3 weeks' time. No idea what they're going to see. But it was incredibly exhilarating. It felt like improvised jazz. It felt like improvised music. And I loved it. And I've tried to work that way in my own projects ever since Black Dog was put together that way. Gospel of Us started 6 o'clock on the morning of Good Friday with a 97-year-old man who stood up and sang a hymn, a call to prayer, which was witnessed by about 4 people and a dog, and me with my camera. The first scene with Michael on the beach being baptized was watched by about 300 people who'd realized something was going on and came down to see what was happening. I included a few little sequences to try and knit scenes together, but it was basically what happened, my version of what happened over that long weekend. That's the Last Supper in a working men's club in Port Talbot, with the Manic Street Preachers as the house band. And then, of course, he has to carry across, this bloodied man has to carry across for 3 miles through the centre of Port Talbot with, Marks and Spencer's behind him and stuff. It was very weird and like a Louis Buñuel film. And you can see how many cameras and iPhones and stuff, people did not want to look at him. The blood and everything, just didn't want to look at him. They'd rather see him mediated through a device. And it made the atmosphere very strange and disturbing. And then it continued, and by the end, the sun came down, and he was crucified on a roundabout, and all the little cameras turned into candles, and it became like a cathedral. It was really beautiful. And the spume from the sea came in and lit up in the lights that were on and became stars. So, yeah, nobody planned that. It just occurred. Again, another kind of life-changing experience, really. Amazing show. And it changed Michael. Michael decided he didn't want to be an actor anymore. He wanted to be an activist. So he moved out of Hollywood. He sold his 2 houses in Hollywood and moved back to Port Talbot. And now he's an actor for hire, just so that he can put money into causes to try and help local people and agitate for changes in the law for various issues in Welsh life. I think he's quite an inspiring man. This is the other project I did with Bill. It's called Wolf's Child. It was a play about the animal nature inside us. We did it in Norwich and we did it in Cornwall, and every time I went out with the camera and shot scenes, so I'm slowly knitting it together as a film. I've also done lots of paintings and drawings based on the same theme, so the final piece will be a book of all of these drawings and paintings and a feature film. There were puppets and actors turning into stags and crows and wolves. What happened was the audience would arrive at 7 o'clock at night, and we'd lead them into the woods, and this strange show would happen around them and involve them. And since then, you know, film is a very difficult medium compared to books. I can think of an idea and have a coffee in the morning and then just start it as a book. I don't have to ask anybody's permission or raise a budget or any of those sorts of things, whereas film is a tortuous process, and I've not found it easy. I like doing it, but all the stuff around it and the politics around it, I don't like.
Why do you think you're drawn to it?
The highs are the highest of highs.
Yeah.
There were moments in Miramask where we'd spent months designing characters and creating CG models, and it's laborious and boring, and they keep bringing in the new version, and I tweak a bit, and it just goes on and on and on. I spent a day in a motion capture studio being a little hedgehog guy, waving at the camera and doing various things. I wore the suit with all the ping pong balls on it. And then that motion is just given to the model, and suddenly it's waving at me and doing, and it's the most amazing thing after all these months to see this suddenly animated into life. So there were things like that. On The Gospel of Us, I had written the music for it as well, and it was all done at an incredible crush at the end to try and get it ready for a festival. And my mate Matt Sharp came in to play cello, and he had most of the lead lines. And I played I was recording the piano as he arrived. We finished that, and he was just sitting listening. And then he just got his cello and started to play, and made it. Absolutely made it. Suddenly, the film had an identity with this cello. And I was in the corner in tears. I mean, I was just so emotional.
I wondered if music was an element of film that is not in comics.
It is completely. It is absolutely.
That is a draw for you because
and it's also, I think just pictures with music is the purest form of film for me.
Yeah.
I love great dialogue. I mean, I love writers who write great dialogue.
Said pure cinema is painting and music.
It really is, I think.
Yeah.
So the times when I found a piece of music, I mean, in The Gospel of Us again, I got all the footage home and just didn't look at it for about 2 months. I was so scared to look at it. And then I realised, you've got to start. So I got one scene out and just started looking at it. And all you can hear is people chattering, and it's awful. So I stripped all the sound out and found a piece of music that I thought felt like it. and put it up against it, and suddenly it comes to life and is something else. It's another world entirely. So the highs are huge highs, but the lows making Mirror Mask were miserable. The fear that I didn't have anything on Gospel of Us was harsh. And then Luna lost its funding after we did the first shoot because the financial crash happened and all the money was tied up in BlackRock, a company called BlackRock that went bust. Right. And so we had to refinance the film from scratch with an angry crew who were not being paid their last week's work. I mean, it was murder, absolute murder. So I've never had lower lows than I have working in film. But those little highs are great. The trouble is, the highs tend to disappear out of my head. It's like good reviews. Whereas the lows sit on my heart. And I never forget a really bad review. So it's that sort of thing, really. And in the middle of the terrible refinancing of Luna, and the sort of pain over that, and wondering whether I'd ever finish it, all, you know, everybody's put in so much work, and I was so happy with what we'd shot. Maybe we'll never finish it. I had an idea to do Caligari, the book Caligari, and I just, well, I can do it now. I just get up this morning and start it. How are those experiences comparable? So that was my conclusion, really. But I've carried on making bits of film. I like to keep my hand in. This was a sequence for a documentary about Christopher Lee, made with puppetry and live action and animation and all kinds of stuff. This was a sequence for this film Caligula, which you may know. Terrible film. Probably the worst film ever released. And that's the writer of the film saying that. That's Gore Vidal gave it that review. So a mate of mine was handed over all 97 hours of rushes for Caligula in a lockup in Burbank, and with a brief, just can you rescue anything from this mess? It was originally produced by Bob Guccione at Penthouse magazine. The film was released without a director's name attached, or a composer's name, or an editor's name. There was another important, a writer's name. All of those credits were missing because they were all either walked off in disgust or were fired. So it was a basket case of a movie, but it had these amazing actors. It's got Malcolm McDowell in it, and John Gielgud, and Helen Mirren. So he started editing it from the script by Gore Vidal to try and tell the story properly. And he got halfway through cutting it and realised he hadn't used a single frame from the original release of the film. And then he made a kind of bet with himself to see if he could get to the end of the cut without using a single frame. And he did. There's not a single frame from the original release in the new release. But there was one scene missing then and now, and that was a dream sequence at the beginning that Vidal wrote to set up several themes in the film. And so because it's at the beginning, we could do it as a title sequence, so I did that as an animatic title sequence. And it went to Cannes. It got picked up for the Cannes Film Festival. And most importantly, Malcolm McDowell, whose whole life and career was blighted by the first release and never recovered and would never talk about it, was finally convinced to see the new cut and loves it and is now introducing it in screenings in LA. So that's probably the best thing to come out of it. Okay, last moment on this, thankfully, because it must be past midnight by now. These are illustrations for Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers. It was the inspiration for the film Stalker, Tarkovsky's Stalker. While I was on this book, I started to see images online that I didn't understand, and I looked into that. Turns out they were created by AI, machine learning, and so it took about 10 minutes to work out how that worked. And then I spent a day on the floor of my studio in a fetal position, assuming that was my life over. I had a play with a couple of AI generators online. really just decided, I had an album cover in the works at the time from my cellist friend, and it was called, his band is called ZRI, so I had no idea what the album cover was going to be. I typed in 6 words into Midjourney, and it gave me that. And the problem with that is that I like it. And it looks a bit like my work. And my neighbour has done a master's degree in artificial intelligence. I ran round with a print of this to her and said, look at this thing that thing did. How did this do that? It looks like my work. And she said, well, you see what's happened there is it's probably gone off into the interweb and it's found your name and your work. And it's looked at those and it's sort of learnt from those. And I said, no, it can't. The prompt that I used wasn't my name. I didn't put my name in the prompt. That'd be mad. I just put some random words. Cello, mist, a few words. And she said, well, probably knows your IP address. And I said, oh man, really? Really? Is that a thing? So anyway, turns out it doesn't know my IP address. It turns out really that it was just luck. I've got a reasonably broad sort of spectrum of work, and the words that I used happened to come up with something that sort of touched the edge of it. Because I've now made thousands of images for a book. I decided I needed to respond to this brave new world. So I've done this book called Prompt Conversations with Artificial Intelligence. I set up 3 tasks for AI to do, to work out what it did really, what it did well, what it did badly, where its strengths were, just to get to know it really. I'm always loved technology. I was an early adopter of Macs and Photoshop and all of that. I use technology in the films that I make and music. It's fine. So I'd much rather come at it from a point of view of understanding it and trying it, and rather than just writing it off completely. So the first one was I was in the midst of starting work on Gilgamesh with Robert McFarlane, so I had Gilgamesh in my head. So I fed Chapter 5, the important central chapter of Gilgamesh, into the AI, 2 lines at a time, to see if anything of the narrative would survive that process of 4,000 years of existence, 2,000 underground with nobody ever seeing it, moving from cuneiform tablets, which is this arcane writing system that was only really deciphered in the mid-1800s, obviously by English people, so into English and an English view of what those stories were, back into the hive mind of whatever the hell AI is, to a purely visual form like the cuneiform tablets that it started with. Can you follow the narrative still? And it turns out you kind of can. It's a bit bewildering to start with, but if you just go through the pages and say what you see, you pick out the key moments of the story. First one. That's the violent bit of the story. Second one, I wanted to see how AI sees us, understands us. So I fed into the bot one headline from my newspaper of choice every morning. And I got reflected back at me a really Black Mirror version of human life. Very strange material it coughed up, like Boris Johnson's food policy. That was our Prime Minister at the time. It was several Prime Ministers ago. I forget how many Prime Ministers we've had now. Things like that, where the Labour Party became the party of patriotism. Keir Starmer was trying to get change Labour's image into the patriotic party. So look what he's done. Look what I said. Look what it's done. It's wrapped these figures in the flag. There's a phrase in English, being wrapped in the flag, being overly patriotic. It's like some AI joke. That one disturbed me, that one. Anyway, I took all of this experience and came up with a bunch of questions. As I say, I go out for a walk every morning. I took all of this out for a walk in my favourite walk in Rye Harbour. I took my camera and took pictures as I went, which I usually do. I took pictures of the birds, which I usually do. And I took took my iPhone and just talked my way through the arguments, working out what I thought the problems were, my anxieties, whether I fitted into this world at all, what it does, how I was feeling. And if anything, the image that came to mind was not Stalker, the Tarkovsky film, it was Solaris, the other great Tarkovsky film. This feeling of an intelligence picking through my head and putting images in front of me that I've really felt disturbed by it all. So then I took all of my questions, took them home, and got the Mid-Journey to create images to answer those questions. I took all my photographs of the birds, and I re-rendered everything using a different artificial intelligence, which texturized everything using sampling from my own paintings. So everything started to look like my own work. Everything merged into one. And that was how I felt about everything at that point. Very, very disturbing month I had doing this. In the end, I've come down really against it. Not in places like virology and anywhere where number crunching is going to be crucial and pattern recognition. That's what AI does brilliantly, and that's where it will be. I still worry about the sheer quantities of energy that it uses at a time when we should be not doing that. Issues of language models is slightly different. Again, that comes with its pitfalls and some benefits. But when it comes down to our creative lives, our imaginative lives, I just don't think it has any business there. I think, yes, it will put people out of work, but technology kind of always puts people out of work. I'm thinking on a much more fundamental level than that. I think it will fundamentally change the nature of our definition of what creativity is. And I think that strikes down to the core of us. And these are big, powerful forces, and you play with these things at your peril. So that's where I am. I played with it during that month and did a couple of jobs, and I felt quite ill doing those jobs. And so I put it to one side because ultimately I don't believe the politicians understand it and will do anything about it. The tech bros will just continue to make as much money as they can out of it and not give a damn what disruption they're doing to our mental health and our notion of art and creativity. So it's going to be down to us as individuals to make those choices. We can choose to work ethically or we can choose not to. Because for AI to do its business, it has to rip other artists' work. That's the only way it can function. So it is fundamentally unethical as far as I'm concerned. There we go. I don't mean to bring you all down at the end of a lovely evening. So here's a drawing of a hedgehog on a paper plate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was just awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, Dave will be here a while yet.
Yeah.
If anyone wants anything signed,
Yeah.
just one drawing each person, because otherwise we'll be here all night.
If anybody has any quick last-minute questions, I'm
Yeah.
happy to answer them. I think we did a couple of questions along the way. Yes?
I'm curious what you think about closed AI models. So saying a AI model based exclusively on your work, not taken from any other source than the one you feed it.
I think those things are going to be very difficult to police. I think my worry with these sorts of arguments, and there are many, and there will be artists who use AI in any form and get some really fascinating, surprising results out of it because people are creative, people are imaginative. They will do that. But is the total destruction of the notion of creativity worth those pieces of work? I worry that they are the Trojan horses, and that example is a better example, but is still a kind of Trojan horse for normalising this idea of using AI as creativity. As far as I'm concerned, it misunderstands what creativity is. It's not the end result. AI is just an endless, infinite plane of end results. The creativity is the pathway there. I'm sure you've all created something, I'm sure of it. And you know the challenge of doing something, of testing yourself, and heading down a path thinking you know where you're going, and then suddenly, oh, there's another path you never thought you would try that one instead. That's where the creativity is. The end result is almost a side effect of it. So this notion that the world can exist on an endless, meaningless, because AI is not intelligent, it's very badly named, it doesn't understand anything, an endless plane, an infinite plane of end results is, the end, as far as I'm concerned. It is the end. The end. Okay?
Can I do a follow-up then?
Yes, please do.
We have a common friend, Jose Villarrubia,
Oh, yeah.
and he's been outing comic book artists who've used AI and are then, basically tracing AI bullshit.
Oh, right, okay.
Have you seen or experienced anything like that? And you've already said what you think of it, but where would you ideally like for us to go other than burning AI?
And I realise that's completely unreasonable. The Pandora's box is open and you can't stuff it back in. So I don't know is the answer. It's very hard to give any kind of advice to the sea of young faces I see when I go to art schools to talk about. I always found it hard to give advice, what they should be doing. Now it's completely impossible. So I think, there are certain legislative options that can be taken up. I'm a member of the Labour Party in England, and I've been talking to representatives there, trying to make them understand this specific thing, because I think they see AI as just one thing, and of course it's not. It's everything. It's many, many different things. And in the area of our imaginative lives, our creative lives, that's where I'm interested, and they need to understand what they're unleashing for nothing. There is no great wealth to be gained by giving all our copyright away to image scraping models. All you'll do is make a handful of tech companies very, very wealthy, even more wealthy than they are, and put lots of people out of work. But even more important, reduce the notion of creativity in our lives to nothing. Anybody who tries to tell you that tappity 6 words on a keyboard is the equivalent, the creative equivalent of going out into the world and understanding something and experiencing somebody else's life or something in the world and ingesting it and coming back and expressing that in your chosen art form through your mind and imagination. I mean, they're quantumly different experiences. So, there's the legislative side, which we must continue to pursue, and there are some court cases happening. We'll see what happens with them. I'm just trying to. I'm hoping that people individually will choose to be tired of it and reject it, and hopefully will start to recognise it for what it is. Already, when you've seen an AI image, instinctively, now the models will get better, they'll be able to fool us better. But I just hope that people will tire of meaninglessness. I don't have much faith that they will, frankly, but I hope that that's going to be the case. Can we talk about something else?
Dave, to give you some hope, I have a kid who's gone to art school and now pursuing a career in movie making. Never uses AI. Neither does the colleagues.
Great. That's great. There's really no need to, because the one thing I can do when I talk to art students now is I'm much less interested in how they're doing stuff, because there are so many technical processes. Everything's so sophisticated. I'm really not that interested. I want to know why they've done it, and if they can't explain to me what inspired them and the pathways that they've taken to, then I know they've just been tappity. Okay, should we leave it there?
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yes.